The Shades of the Abyss. Book 1 of the Living Lore. Written by F. Lockhaven and E. J. Iller. Chapter 17. Goffey led the group into a bar, one unlike any of the other readily available drinking establishments in the area. It was off the main road, off the trade routes, and on the side of the city where bars were infrequent. It was an under-the-table establishment in every way, not set up to host customers but rather hide them. Every booth and table seemed to be miserably cramped, so much so that nothing more than a single mug could fit on either side. A place where one-on-one trade and gifts and favors were exchanged, and the drinks were simply an afterthought. It was the perfect place to find someone to trade with in an illicit business, and unfortunately that was just the place they all wanted to be at the moment. "Sirs and madam," Goffey began, keeping his tone very low and polite. "If you'd like, I can inquire for you, as a patron and member of this establishment, as to what prices are yet open for the journey you are about to undertake." "We'd appreciate it," Baxter said. Goffey nodded and bowed, then approached the barkeep, who stood watch over the floor like a sentry with mugs instead of swords and shields. While they had a hidden conversation, half of which was done with fast movements of their hands and fingers moving together to form symbolic gestures, the three leaned up against a far wall and watched. "This is a far cry from the Porters Guild," Baxter whispered. "The Porters Guild would run us out of the city," Idle said, "if they knew how we came here or why we have to go as we do." "At least it'd be fair," Baxter said. "Anyone up to transport us across the way will take us for criminals without a second thought and thieve us with the price." "I have a thought," Derek offered. They both turned to him in their own unique, judging way, and he sank back against the wall, clamping his mouth shut. "I think our better bet right now," Baxter decided, "would be to buy our way into work on a caravan." "How is that better?" Idle asked. "They could shelter us and feed us in exchange for our work," Baxter said. Derek nodded and pointed to him. "And they'd move in the day," she said, "and stop at night, the exact opposite of the travel we have to make." "Oh," Baxter realized. "Night porters don't make these long trips," Idle explained, "without extreme compensation for the danger. Selling Derek's muscle as a guard won't be quite enough to make them sprint for the whole 4-day journey to the nearest trading town in the old world." "Which should be Brat," Baxter said. Or not." "I thought it was Shish," Derek said. A few people noticed him speaking up, either because of the sharp S sounds he made in the relatively silent bar, or because of the word he uttered. They all noticed that many eyes were glaring their way, seeing them fairly as the strangers they were. Not just strange, but out of place. They did not belong in this dark, immoral place. Goffey returned at last, and without a word ushered the three out the door and back into the street, leaving just a short peak of light from the curtain over the doorway as they exited. "I guess we're not on their short list for travel, then?" Baxter asked. "Yes," Goffey said. "That is to say, no. It seems no one is making runs from this, hall at the moment to the old world due to news of traveling brigands and raiders that are sweeping the entirety of the old world countries and plunging them into a sudden upswing of war." He shrugged, as though that was simply the nature of business. Idle turned to Baxter with a worried look. She'd never even heard of wars or brigands with bands large enough to destabilize countries, and if anyone could assuage her doubts over their quest, she wanted it to be him. Baxter, however, looked similarly displeased with the news and gazed up at Derek instead. "Well," Derek said, "on to the next, then?" He looked down and calmed both of his friends immediately. "Goffey," Baxter began, "what precisely went on with your negotiations? Was it a judge-by-appearance sort of deal?" "Travel's just stricter now," Goffey answered with a shrug. "Might stay that way for a while." "I mean, how did you introduce us?" Baxter asked more clearly. As what? Travelers, merchants, runaways? What was your angle to open this dark, unseen door for us? Oh, right, Goffey said. They never asked. Just said you were people trying to cross to the old world. No cargo, money uncertain. We should probably count our coins before we keep going, Baxter decided, lest we get saddled with a riding debt and have to pull whatever cart does accept us. They gathered everything up and gave it to Idle to keep on the inside pocket of her Porter's Guild apron. In all, they had 3 silver ducats and 28 bronze, and not 1 ounce of gold between them. Such a price was agreeable to Derek but pitiful to Idle. With that as their basis, they tried to find someone willing to accept passengers at 1 silver per head while reserving the rest for extra negotiation fees or contractual arrangements to make the trip less terrible. Goffey obliged them to tour the town until their feet started to drag, and their exhaustion wore on them like a heavy wet blanket over their backs. Baxter was the first to waver, then Idle, and even Derek grew short-tempered by the total lack of rest, given that he had been the most active during their harrowing escape the prior night. The book began to feel heavy in his arms at last. "Say, Goffey," Derek began, "you know, I was just thinking, we're putting an awful lot of trust in you out of your own obligation, yeah?" Yes, Goffey said. "I am at your service." "I wouldn't do this much work on the side for someone, even if I was already being paid to help them once," he said. "If you've got the choice, you ought to find someone that'll pay you better for your work." "Oh, pay is not an issue," Goffey replied. "Pay is guaranteed more often than not in this town. So many traders come through. Even with the old world route currently closed off, it is an efficient in-between for the cities that border the Empire's lands and make use of the river where things are sent covertly away. If only you were traveling further north, you'd only need a raft and but a moment of clouds to pass under the moonlight on the current." "Travel has to be by moon," Derek said. "We can only rest in the day even after we leave." "That may only delay negotiations further," Goffey told him. He muttered something to himself and waved his wrists around. Derek saw him hiding something, and he reached to grab him by the shoulder. Derek's patience was running out, but not for his friends. Sir?" Goffey stuttered. "Derek, stop," Idle said. She tapped on his wrist to get him to release their weary guide. "We're all too tired for this." "Well, if we sleep the night here," Baxter said, "at 4 bronze a head for beds without sheets and no food, we'll have worse problems than just leaving town by nightfall." Derek groaned. His patience was still on the edge of depletion. All he could think about was sleep, and the easiest means of forcing his way forward and out of the east gates to the road ahead. "Perhaps," Idle suggested, "we should speak with the Porters' Guild again?" "I doubt the doorman will be happy to see us back," Baxter muttered. "You know what I forgot about?" Derek said as his stomach joined the conversation. "We haven't eaten anything real yet, have we?" "Goffey," Baxter said, "is there no between-house for travelers in Galilee? Someplace with charity? Or possibly a church with connections to Chechery? Our goal through the city happens to be one passed down from a certain person of high standing in our home city." "Well," Goffey said, "if nobility is on the line or is of issue of some importance, there may be a place that can service you. But they'd need some proof, some reliable symbol of your heritage there, or at least of your employ." Baxter turned to Derek and then to the book he still carried swaddled in his robe. There were no robes like it in design or color, or even the length to the mid-back. It was the certifiable, approved dressing of the scholars and scribes of the Archive of Chechery, a place recognizable by any traveler within the Vincian Empire. "We may have something," he said. "But tell us first, what is this place you plan to show us next?" "Our time is of the essence," Idle added, "and the reason for our hostilities earlier is that we are being pursued." Goffey suddenly became less open and less hospitable. He regarded the group again with a more worried expression, his eyes lingering the longest on Derek. "Why?" Goffey asked. If it is not offensive to know, that is. An attempt was made on the master archivist's life, Baxter admitted, and I am his sole apprentice. He instructed me to leave the Empire entirely and seek shelter in the old world until times were safer. That much at least was true. He didn't have to say the entire reason why they were traveling. It was too fantastical for a peasant man such as Goffey to believe outright. "Oh, well," Goffey began, "even with the war going on." "I believe it is in our best interest to flee," Baxter said. "Those pursuing us, our enemies, they only move at night and are ruthlessly tenacious." "They'll even hop up," Derek explained, "on the back of a moving cart to drag you off in the night." Goffey seemed skeptical but trustworthy in his way. He was straining to believe their words outright, it seemed. Well, yes. Then the Thieves' Guild Hall may have someone to assist you." "Even thieves have guilds," Derek informed Baxter with a dismissive tone. "I ask you not to look down on them for the name alone," Goffey said. "It is an open secret of Galilee. They are remnants of an order from the old world that forced wealth from the pockets and hands of the royal houses that hoarded it for themselves out of corrupt greed, so the peasantry would not starve or suffer in the underlooked squalors of the lesser cities. To do so made them thieves, but they are gentlefolk of high repute who denounce common thugs and protect those unable to protect themselves." "Now that, I don't believe," Derek said. "Of all the things we've seen and learned, that's the hardest kind of lie to pass by me yet." "It's not impossible," Baxter protested. "If thieves had honor, they'd have jobs," Derek disputed adamantly. Baxter and Idell didn't have the same scruples. Their silent argument stemmed more from their tired minds and desperation. They were at their collective wits' end, with barely anything to show for what they'd gone through in their travels so far, and a single itching worry persisted in Baxter's mind about the true value and worth of their expedition. "Let's try," Baxter said. Derek glanced down at him. "Just to try, to see. At the worst, we may just have to look for something else at night and defend ourselves as best we can." "All right," Derek agreed. "That plan I like better. But sure, let's see if this works out first." "Excellent," Goffey said. "Don't you worry either. The Thieves' Guild takes passengers across the border frequently. They have a long-standing heritage with similar guilds abroad in the old world, the orders and leagues of the undercities. They will see to you fairly, and again, not to judge against the name, they value money enough not to covet it." "Please take us there," Idle said. "I feel we're skirting dangerous territory discussing this out in public." "Follow close," Goffey urged. "There are thieves and there are thieves in Galilee. I will take you to those who mean you well, but I cannot guarantee that we will avoid those who would mean ill." "That's their mistake," Derek said. He was out of trust and knew they were out of options. He followed along in the rear, tacitly entrusting Goffey to defend his friends from the front of their procession as they entered the centermost district of buildings in the wide expanse of the old world side city. It was afternoon. The sun was still high enough to cast light between the buildings, but the underworld alleys were so tight and the buildings so high it made that light dim. They were in the thick of it, it seemed, with no way out but forward. Goffey led them finally to a narrow door, somehow even narrower than all the rest, which opened into a room of total darkness. Once inside, Baxter looked around and discerned the nature of the place. A small walk-through lobby of sorts, much like the entryway of the archive but the size of a closet. The darkness was immediately disconcerting. It was a deliberate dark, shadows acting as walls in open spaces with minimal lighting. A place for those unaccustomed to the sun who chose to hide themselves during all hours until there was no one around to see them leaving. Just entering in the day felt taboo, like walking into the archive at night. There were times to come and go, and a certain presence of a place made those times apparent by a feeling deep within. The feeling of the place, the aura, felt all wrong. It was so dead silent it felt wrong to breathe too loudly. The only one who pushed on unoffended was Derek, whose agitation and self-defense prompted his instincts to overcome any general myopic distortions. If there was space, he moved. If he bumped into something, it would be hurt more than him. Idle moved with similar confidence but stayed closer to Baxter. If anyone could talk their way out, it would be him, and if he failed, she planned to pull him back with full force and entrust the remainder to Derek. Goffey finally led them to a room. All they could see of the inside were painted doors standing out against charcoal-blackened walls, darker than shadow itself. "I'll tell you this," Derek muttered. "You don't dress the place well." "It's for secrecy," Goffey whispered. "These deals and what they entail, ordinarily." "I understand," Baxter said, "but I'm afraid, in our state, if it's this dark, we might sleep before anyone comes to see us." "A light would be nice," Idell agreed. Goffey rubbed his hands together and nodded as they entered the room. "Of course," he said. "Can't read without light, He let the door shut quietly while Baxter stood, wide awake and terrified. Chapter 18. The waiting room was cramped and plush with pelt coverings across deep reclining chairs and benches. It was about as big as Baxter's room from his bed to his desk, but was so packed in with things to sit on that it felt like there was no space at all. Just benches and a table and the low, low light of a single hanging candle without a cover dripping its wax off the wick into a silvery platter underneath it. It left an acrid smell of burning wax in the air that wafted throughout the room. "Adele," Baxter said, "I need to wear my cloak. Can you hide the book with your apron?" "We already didn't get away," she reminded him, "with you looking burly wearing it under your clothes. You think these people are so backward in their darkened places they'd see a woman with a square belly and let it slide as normal?" "To wrap the book in, you mean?" Derek asked Baxter. Idell was less offended by that, but remained obstinate. "We can't risk showing it to them," Baxter said. "But that cloak is one of a kind. Only we at the archive have them. If they see me wearing it, they will have to believe I am of legitimate employ there." "Oh, fine," she grumbled. She tried to stand up and had to lean one knee on the seat while she unfastened the back of her apron over her neck. "Excuse me, boys. A lady is changing. Are you going to just stare at her?" "Should we sing a song?" Baxter asked. Her glare finally persuaded him to turn away. Derek, ornery as he was, still obeyed, holding the covered book up to his face and looking away toward the door. His ire was thoroughly redirected toward the green hue of the cover. On the other side could be any potential brigand or thief of ill repute they would be forced to entrust their great journey with. He didn't like it, and made his protest known to all present. "I know," Baxter said soothingly to Derek, seeing him tensing up. "But it's this or nothing." "It's this or my plan," Derek reminded him, "which is to break every shade skull that we come across and wait until morning again." "I've got my doubts that'll work," Baxter said. The story of Platius and his journey with the Shade Man was stuck in his mind, still unread and the knowledge incomplete, along with so many of the strange creatures and rites he'd already undergone in his exploration of their destination, left unchanged since those ancient times. "All right here," Idell said. She held out her apron, one layer removed from her outfit, and stood seemingly ashamed in just her plain, straight dress. Baxter noticed how it changed her form, not having the waist-high ties around her to cinch her clothing closer to her back and belly. But he did not speak, and when he thought it, he looked away, just in case she noticed his expression. "Right," Derek said. He unwrapped the book and put it on the table for a moment. Baxter took up his cloak again. It was wrinkled in some wrong places and didn't quite hold its regular form, but it was good enough. The apron wrapped around the book and covered every part of it. Derek even made the Porters Guild symbol present itself on the front end of the book, making it appear like a carefully wrapped official present. "I'm going to rest my eyes," Idell said with a powerful yawn. She turned away from the candlelight and seemingly drifted straight to sleep against the corner of two benches meeting along the corners of the wall. Baxter hid his yawn in his hand and leaned back, straining to keep his eyes open. "You don't think this is just a trap, right?" Derek asked. "Because if there's any place we can't see, they could just shove some fire in and burn us to death or something, couldn't they?" "That's a heinous thought to consider," Baxter said. "They're thieves, though," Derek reminded him, as if that were the perfect defense against any argument Baxter could muster. "Thief is just a mistranslation," Baxter said. Derek waved his hand around in agitation. "It's more like reverse taxpayers. They took from the rich and gave the money back to the poor, so they weren't dying under the oppression of tyrants." "Oh," Derek said. "Although, actually," Baxter added, "I did read the journal of one such royal financier of a sultan's palace from the old world. Because they went through so many thefts and lost so much money, they just ended up increasing taxes in different ways, with food or mandatory military service to recruit more militiamen who in turn were paid to hunt and stop the thieves outright. They always found ways to maintain their power, even when money wasn't the primary resource to use." Derek hummed. "Shut up," Idle groaned out the curt and direct command. The boys decided somberly to follow her advice and rested on the table. Derek leaned back with his arms crossed, and Baxter laid his head down on the book. As he did, he was forcibly subjected to smelling the floral scents that came off Idell's apron. Even on their terrifying journey somehow, a pleasant scent lingered around her belongings. After a few precious moments of rest and respite, the door received a knock, and the party took on a visitor. It was Goffey once more. He left the door open for someone to walk through. It was an old man with dark olive skin and a deep black beard that hung down straight and short off his chin and in a shadow-like cover over his jaw and cheeks. He wore loose garb from the lands to the south, where the desert met the forests and where the sun was far hotter for far longer in the year than the Vincian people experienced. Baxter stood up first and looked the man over. He had eyes that offered no patience for him or his friends. Baxter could tell they immediately faced an uphill battle of sorts just to negotiate their purpose, let alone their price. He recalled reading about the customs of the old world and gave a short, polite bow to the man, who responded with a knowing nod. "This gentleman," Goffey said, "is already prepared to make a run through the long stretch to the town of Brat, far into the Federated Nation. He said he could take you as far as there and no farther for 1 silver piece each, and he intends to travel through night and day." "We'll pay you now," Baxter said excitedly. "We have extra money left over. If that could be used for provisions on board to keep your vessel moving, we would gladly give that up as well." The man scanned the room to look them over. One thing caught his eye, the four-cornered thing in Derek's arms. When Derek saw the man looking, he held it tighter and stared him down. "You are bringing that?" he asked, his accent stiff but not unpleasant as he pointed to the book. "We are. Yes," Baxter replied. He tugged on his cloak from both sides of the inner hem and looked up with confidence. "This matter we are on concerns the great archive at Checheri regarding the return of an ancient artifact to its homeland deep in the old world territories as a matter of personal pride and a passing request of the master archivist, Lothan." The mention of the name made the man lift an eyebrow curiously. He observed Baxter's short robe and narrowed his eyes in satisfaction. "I am Yahid," he announced. "Give me your names, please." They did so in their own order of most awake to least. "I am Baxter." "I'm Derek. My name is Idle." "Come, travelers," Yahid said. "I shall receive you immediately. We need waste no time." Baxter turned to his friends with a grin as the man left the room ahead of them. They were back out in the blinding dark following after Yahid's whitish robes immediately, and followed Goffy's lead to a hidden chamber that led downward. "Hold on now," Derek said. "How are we getting out like this?" "The caverns," Goffy explained, "helped to entrench the old survivors of the River War, which formed the town of Galilee long ago. Before the fortifications were built and the city was made on the east half of the river, the people who settled here relied on the caves of the dried-out underwater river to make their travels. It leads out of the city, unseen by the river of stone, with stations only for those committed and known to both the Order and the Guild. Only the most trusted thieves," Derek said. "Or," Baxter corrected, "the most honorable." Derek scoffed at the remark and followed down after them both. He turned back as he descended slowly to the dark of the room behind him, with a bad feeling readable on his dour expression. "The sun will set soon," Yahid said. "Under the veil of night, we shall be going." "How long were we asleep?" Baxter wondered quietly. "Couldn't have been too long," Idle said. "This crick in my neck is telling me at least 2 hours." 3.5, Derek said. He turned forward to their curious faces. "When I can't sleep, I pass time in my head by reliving boring jobs. One of them lasts almost exactly 10 minutes, and I counted at 6, 12, 18, 19, 20. Derek leaned against the cavern wall and scraped his bare shoulder against the dry rocks for a moment. "That's extremely impressive," Baxter said. "But you didn't sleep at all?" Hey, Derek chuckled dryly. He was stumbling like he was drunk, a sight Baxter was used to seeing many times over from his own dysfunctional family. The sight gave him a brief tinge of melancholy. They finally arrived at a fairly well-lit area, deep enough in the earth to be warm despite the lack of light or sizable fires. Every candle spread its light out far through thick glass lanterns. People were working, their faces covered by dark sashes and their hands wrung hard with the effort of long periods of stress without rest. Cracked fingernails were signs of hard but unchecked work. They made Baxter flinch as they passed by, undeterred in their march through the carved-out cavern walls. Finally, they came to the dock of carriages. Some were being unloaded of sensitive objects, jars and satchels full of things that were better left out of either land. Forbidden spices and barred trade goods that were too unlawful to even fine for possession, and many of the carts carrying them were constructed in ways to hide them in compartments within the frame. Idle recognized some of the makes, with sloping sidewalls in the rear that led up to fancy riding seats in the front, made for 2 horses comfortably and 4 in desperation. Carrying carts, not for drugs but for people, usually nobles going across the roads to other towns. Their cart was much simpler. It was half loaded with barrels and kegs of things. Baxter saw a load of stripped, cured animal legs being lowered into one barrel and whole fish being dunked into the waters of another, where they quickly seemed to revive from the moisture and swim in the tight space. A food porter between towns seemed innocent enough. Why his business brought him into the underdark of misery and corruption was unforeseen and unknown. "The payment," Yahid said, "shall be delivered outside of town." "Very well," Baxter said. He turned to Idle and nodded, but she didn't do anything. He looked down at her and realized, again, she wasn't wearing her apron. Then he turned to Derek. "Oh, right," he said. "I was wondering when I wrapped this why it felt lumpy." They all forgot that she kept their scant resources on the inside pockets of her apron. Derek carefully tried to reach into it, but ended up unfurling part of the cover in the process. Yahid watched them intently as they fumbled around. Baxter joined the effort and held the book up while Derek rifled through the many folds of the apron, and Idle quickly came over to do the most logical thing by removing it outright. "Here," she said. She hadn't forgotten why they wrapped it up. Derek and Baxter didn't even react at first. Their brief break from danger had made them less careful than before. They exposed the book as they had once desperately tried not to, only to regret it immediately when the first flame in the cavern turned blue. Then another and another, until the only light shining nearby came from the light of Goffy's eyes. "Ha!" the thief guide shouted. Yahid looked on with fret as every thief in the cave, one by one, turned into hissing blue-eyed creatures with no more sense than reason for violence. Baxter immediately tossed off his cloak and covered up the book from above while it was in Derek's hands. The blue fire was subdued but not diminished. The lights dimmed from the many thieves' eyes, but their intent remained. "There it is!" Goffy exclaimed. "I knew I saw it. I knew, so I followed you. I knew, so I tried to ensnare you. I knew, and so I shall be rewarded for it." "To hell with the whole lot of you!" Derek shouted. His strong voice echoed through the cavern and filled every tunnel and drive in and out of sight. "You come close, and I'll sink this book 50 pages deep into your skulls." "Get on the cart, sir!" Baxter shouted to Yahid. "We're under attack." Dozens of blades were drawn, creating a symphonic harmony of metal against sheaths. Yahid ran right to his cart, past some of the criminals that began forming a wall to block the party off. Goffy stepped out in front and tried to smooth back his wispy hair across his head. His eyes were still glowing, not as brightly, but still with a sickeningly deep shade of blue. "It's very fortunate," Goffy said, "that we were able to meet this way. Time after time, I tried to force you away from the light so I could use my power to see through you in the dark. It was pitiful, leading you, lost like lambs, to the back of the barn for the slaughter to commence." "Looks like I was right," Derek said confidently. "No honor among thieves." "They're not just thieves anymore," Baxter said. Did you make contact with a shade? Did you receive the gift?" "Ah," Goffy said. "You know? And yet you are not imbued. You know not the importance of that tome." "I know who did this to you," Baxter said. "The fiend, the Shade Lord. What was his name?" He turned to Idell, whose anger was rapidly mounting. She threw her apron down, money and all, and reached for a lantern hanging on the wall. She took it, pressed her fingers against the hot glass, and tossed it overhead at Goffy, who dodged away. The lantern smashed into the ground, and the blue light that leaked out faded back to orange, and then died. "Where do you get off?" she demanded, "with your wits still about you under that wretched curse?" "Curse?" Goffy said. "Good lady, no, you misunderstand. We are not cursed. The shades, they empowered us to see through the dark as easily as good men can see through the light of day. But we are not good men, you see. After all, we are thieves, as you say." "See, he agrees with me," Derek pointed out. "They all do. That means I was right." Baxter took his cloak off the book and observed the effect. The blue fire was brighter, and Goffy appeared more animated. He stood up taller, arms wider, seemingly stronger just at a glance. The whole room turned to the same deep shade of blue as the book was fully exposed to the air. "Give us the book," Goffy commanded. "It belongs to another." "Perhaps," Baxter said, "but not you." "Do you even know where to go with it?" Goffy asked. Baxter didn't answer. He knew the answer was within, still hidden in the many exploits and adventures of its author, but he lacked the critical information at this most important moment. In his heart, he knew it was important to him. The task was an oath, sworn unto his late master, and now that it was his, he could not revoke or renege it. But Goffy was right. He never considered truthfully whose hands the book was better off in. "And thus did rise like birds off the sands, a fire from this wanderer's hands." A strange verse from a venerable voice filled the cave. The blue fires started to flicker chaotically and began shifting color. The thieves all looked for the source of the noise, but only Goffy seemed aware and turned to the cart of Yahid. The man stood with his hands up, cupping a surge of fire against his palm. It burnt and wavered harmlessly, not even warming his hand, and grew higher. 1,000 flames created 1,000 feathers and flew into the air beyond the reach of the core of the fire's breathing self. And so, it split, 1,000 pieces merging together, 100 to each 10, until 100 birds soared into creation from the fire made of the mage's hands. At his command, the fire exploded outward, and each great waft of flame turned into a flying, burning dove. They swarmed and filled the room with glaring light that blinded the blue eyes of every thief, including Goffy. To those unaffected, Baxter and his friends, they only saw the splendid glory of the dancing firebirds. One dove down and flew by Baxter's face, but he felt no flame and smelled no burning. The fire was alive and shaped and given some kind of congruous mind, like the magic he read in the tales of old. He smiled as he recognized the words at last. They were from a volume of old-world myths and legends, the tale of their great hero Runish, who could speak to the spirits of fire and command them to dance at his command. Yahid stood with his arms out, waving the fire to fly further away, while he whistled the call of a bird with pursed lips. "Come on!" Yahid shouted. "Get on! We have to go!" Baxter snapped out of his fascination and ran forward. Derek and Idle ran after him. All three jumped onto the cart, while Yahid went to the front. His faithful cart leaders, two rugged and lumpy-looking horses, started shuffling forward and pulled the cart up to speed, while the dance of fire and lights flew on behind them. Goffy recovered as the presence of the book left, and the swarm of flaming birds lit fires on the exposed covering of the thieves, even on some of their faces. One thief burned away entirely. First his dry clothing, and then his physical form went gaseous and vanished. The light of the fire intensified and consumed them until their pitch-black skin poured out of the depleting, dried-out wrappings to reveal the death of a shade beneath. Goffy was torn between watching the hissing shadow being destroyed and his escaping targets. "Bugger," he muttered. He turned to the still-gathered thieves and pointed outward. "After them," he commanded. "Down the same tunnel, out the same pass. They can't get far even traveling all hours. Race them to Brat and hunt them down." The thieves under his command, men and shades alike, regrouped and swarmed to the remaining carts, even as their proper owners cowered away from them in fear. Goffy stepped out with his hands behind his back. One wrist shook in the gentle hold of his other hand. "This is one job I can't screw up," he said. "Just one job." His nerves were growing more and more frazzled. It took minutes before the first rider went out through one of the many tunnels to pursue their targets. The evening was still approaching, the light still ruled the outside, and those who dwelled in the dark were poorly equipped to deal with those who could choose to live in the light. Chapter 19. The cart sped over the sands. The rugged beasts, who pulled the cart over the hard, rough terrain, snorted and grumbled as they hauled the travelers through the beginning of the night. The sky was dark overhead, but there was light on the horizon. A beaming signal stood out from the surrounding terrain at the top of a hill, untouched by either forest or grass. Just outside of Vincia, on the other side of the Starlook River, the lands changed drastically. The expansive pastures and prairies that made up the empire ended where the foreign waters began. There was still plant life, but it was short grass, squat shrubs, and trees that stood out from one another, rarely forming more than a copse of woods at a hilltop or in a ditch where the waters pooled. The rains were scarcer here than even mere miles away, and the water of the river did not spill out into the plains as the land sloped down northward to provide for the life of the Vincian lands in the foothills. The old world settled a little higher, not high enough to be cold, but high enough that the rain drained away from it. Baxter remarked on the sight with reserved awe. They were still in a flight for their lives away from a band of terrible mercenaries under the will of the Shades, but the lights from Galilee were already fading and fusing with the sparkling lights of the stars. The only other source of light was ahead of them, at the end of their fast path through the distant hills. "Sir Yahid!" Baxter shouted from the back. "I regret to inform you all too late that we are being pursued by those who wish us harm, and I'm afraid we may lack the compensation to adequately make up for the extra effort you have undertaken to protect us." "You are polite for a young man," Yahid replied. He spurred his desert beasts on, and they obligingly sped up. They were like horses, but saggy and floppy, yet their strange forms did not lack in power. They looked at a glance briefly familiar, as if Baxter had seen or read about them before. "Could you tell me," Baxter asked, "where you're taking us?" Yahid pointed ahead to the light. "A bastion," he said. "A bulwark against the stalkers of the night. The gazing tower." "Hey," Derek called out. "Just what was that back there? You had a bunch of birds that you lit on fire. Is that safe at all?" "Those weren't birds," Baxter said. "One flew right next to my face. I saw it." "Well, I saw plenty," Derek commented. "I saw us get led right into a trap by a man who admitted he was a thief, and then I saw you both try to talk me out of my suspicion like it was all fine and normal to be trusting him. Pardon me for saying it, but I think I've seen enough today." "Rest, friends," Yahid said. "The Order is watching over you. The abyss shall not swallow you up so easily." "Who are you really?" Baxter asked. Yahid turned with a smile, one that lifted his whole face up and turned him into a seemingly different man in an instant. "I can tell you when it's safer," he said. The beasts of burden continued their trek. After an hour, during which the group all rested against the cradling backs of the barrels and caskets around them, the cart slowed, and the light became too harsh to bear even with closed eyes. Baxter had his hood to protect him, and he peered out from under the brim that hung over his forehead. They were at the base of a mighty-looking tower. It was old but not decrepit, well kept, and with recently masoned walls where the wind and elements had chipped some important parts away. The light from above was so great it made the arid, rocky floor seem like it was being beaten down by the midday sun. Baxter led the team out and guided them while they shielded their eyes fruitlessly from the light above them. "Come in," Yahid offered. Baxter obliged while the other two followed his voice. At the base of the tower was a small incline that led to a heavy door. Yahid stopped them there and put his hand up while he muttered something fast and unrecognizable. The door unlatched and opened, rather curiously, Baxter thought, since there was no knob handle or lock visible from the outside. It was just a heavy, flat plank of wood covering the internal mechanisms of some device he couldn't discern. The inside of the tower was as impressive as the outside, but for different reasons. It was wider than it appeared, with desks built into walls and bookshelves that scaled only to shoulder height, dividing the room into quarters. At the opposite side were two matching stairways that spiraled up along the outer edge of the inner wall. It reminded Baxter of the archive he had left behind. The workstations looked similar to his, as did the stacks upon stacks of books from all eras and all places. "Another library?" Derek asked. "Very nearly," Yahid said. "Please come upstairs. We shall explain things there." "If it's all the same," Derek said as he found a place to rest the book once more. "I'd like to keep both my hands free for any further talking up any stairs to any place I haven't been before." "That is fair," Yahid allowed. I will introduce myself first then, friends. I am Yahid Yahazur, sixth heir of the House of Many Forests, in the place you call the Old World. I am also a member of a certain group that has sought to protect you and empower you, a group that Master Lothan had also joined. Master? Baxter said quietly. You knew of him? I have met him many times, Yahid said. It pained me to hear of this attack, but such assaults are not unfamiliar to us. For a very long time we have prepared for this day, though we knew not when or how it would happen until the book resurfaced and its power was reignited. Baxter looked over at the book on the table. The demonium held its place, separate from the sandstone counter, hewn from the same material as the walls of the great tower, seeming a dark, rectangular blot like the shadow of a passing cloud over a great sea of off-white sand. Baxter was shaken by a hand on his shoulder which he instinctively shook off. It was Yahid's hand, and Baxter backed away from him in shame. The book is very powerful, Yahid informed him, and very important. We can tell, Idel said. Snippy as usual, even against a figure of some authority. She had reached her breaking point. Between being shown up, having her father's curse outright dismissed by the only person among them who could read about it, and on the travel out of her homeland, the empire that had entirely made up her world until this point, she was long overdue to snap. Important to a group of demonic monsters from the slithering gates of a shadowy hell, and all its purpose was entrusted to this one. Of all people, a habitual reader with no more sense for the world or proper politics among the guilds than this one over here. She pointed angrily to Derek, who seemed confused and looked behind him to the upper wall. Yes, Yahid said with a sigh. It was worrisome to learn the dreams that told of this event came from one so young as you, Mr. Baxter. My dreams? He asked. He made a whisper of revelation. The abyss. Indeed, Yahid said, there is much to explain. But first, a lady interrupted from on high as she descended to the ground floor. The woman was dressed for travel in robes similar to Yahid's, long and light and airy-looking with a mantle of cloth wrapped around her neck and a veil of silk cast over her hair. She was about as elderly as Yahid, but hid all signs or traces with perfectly applied glamour. Further introductions are in order for this revision to the lore. Sir Yahid, Baxter whispered. Is she supposed to be here? Oh, how charming, the woman said. You have your master's sense of humor. I thought you'd be glad to know that he's alive, but you already seem so keen to replace him that perhaps I should withhold the proof. Master is alive? Baxter exclaimed. Well, I feel like a jerk now, Derek said. He's a tough old geezer. Gazer, Yahid corrected. We are the gazers, ones who watch over the abyss, where the histories of the world encircle toward a shared... No, he was right, the lady informed Yahid. He was making a joke. Was I? Derek asked curiously. Baxter broke the flow of the exchange by dragging the book toward the place where a chair was pushed under the overhang of the desk. He pulled it open and let the pages fall in thuds into each other to reveal the opening illustration. Please tell me, Baxter began. If Master is alive, did he impart any further instructions on what we must do with this book? Well, she said, you are quick to the point. Dutiful adherence is a quality sorely lacking from Lothan's repertoire, but how charmless of me to denigrate my colleague in front of one who cares about him so deeply. I am Madame Sutwood of the Guild Conglomerate. Idle gasped. For her and the porters, the name of Sutwood was as ubiquitous as the names of the ruling royalty were for the common peasantry of Chechery. She was like a celebrity and a powerful authority figure combined. Hi, Derek said. Idle nudged him in the leg to move aside so she could take his spot and get closer. I'm Master Lothan's apprentice, Baxter, he said. I regret to admit that I still don't quite know what I'm doing, and now I am possessed by far more curiosity than fear at the possibility of proceeding further. I must know, what exactly has all this been for?" "He thought you might have trouble learning," she said. "What with all the running for your life to be done. It was fortunate Yahid and I were on our way through to this tower so we could take you in as a temporary measure." From the shades, Baxter realized in a dark tone. His knowledge of them from beginning to end was spotty. Those he knew in life were ruthless hunters, but the ones in the book were passive and docile. Yet, he'd only just begun the great compendium of Platius's knowledge. What remained to learn he could only imagine. It was only after seeing the danger that he understood the importance of what he had to learn. "This tower," she explained, "was created to stand against the shades long ago. During the Age of Conquest, when lords raised armies to siege the lands of others in uneven, imbalanced, and constant conflict, which lasted generations, one lord from the southern lands of the Old World, from the once prosperous kingdom of Shish, brought forth a terror in the night. He made a contract with the shades and wielded them as a terrible weapon, and his force became unstoppable, all but for the lords in the northern lands and the khans to the far east. Together those forces combined and drove them back, wielding the light that chased their shadowy forms away, and they did all of that using the knowledge compiled in that book." She pointed to it, and the grimoire splayed open to the caricature of the author and the many languages his name was written in. They were a wreath of camaraderie, even tongues of the old world, of the cities that were raised in the wake of the shades. All those he met in his travels, all those he spread his words to, carried his legacy on to build towers and share that knowledge with others. Baxter finally felt he understood the true intention of the book. Its beginning was changed from its ending, not in the text, but in the intent. It was a passing journal of a man seeking fortune and the strange things he saw along the way, but what it inspired thereafter caused the world to change. "So someone made a new contract," Derek summed up. His astuteness captured everyone's attention in the room. "And that contract is to get the book, for some reason." "To stop it from propagating, maybe," Baxter said. "Something this significant couldn't be kept in the archive for no reason. It's more than just a book or a curio for some nobleman to gawk at. This is, as you said, Sir Yahid, it is important." "Very," Yahid confirmed. "Though we do not know the reason they have come to claim it. They have, and that must be abetted. This tower was made using the magic of recreation. The light above will shine for 6 days and 6 nights, and on the 7th it shall ascend high into the sky for 600 days and nights as a star shimmering above before it can be called down again." "How high up even is that?" Derek asked, as he marveled at the ceiling toward the light high above. "It will be a high order," Madam Sutwood said, "but you will have to rise to your station in the short time of a week." "My station?" Baxter asked. She turned to the other two, to Idle, who stood in confused reverence, and Derek, the tallest and burliest in the whole room, chest out and arms crossed, his rugged jaw jutting out in a commanding scowl. Titles meant nothing before his brawn and confidence. Madam Sutwood observed him very carefully, to the discomfort of Yahid. "Yes," Yahid said, veering the discussion back on course. "Your higher purpose, your goal, what you were sent out to do." "Which is hidden in the text and context of the book," Baxter continued, "and possibly the metatext." "The living lore," Madam Sutwood said. The words tugged at Baxter's ear. "That is what you were being trained for all along, apprentice scholar. Not only to learn the how and when, or the whom or the where, but the why and when again, and the where else and the what now. You are invited to the heritage of mystics through time to invoke the practiced magics inherited to the world through the heroes and legends of the past, so you may reforge the path that saved the world long before." As Madame Sutwood spoke, a brief wind rustled from within the tower, seemingly from all around her, and fluttered her skirts up inches off the ground. Once she finished, it fell, and many pages were scattered from their flimsy bindings. She clicked her tongue at the brief mess as she looked around. "Those firebirds?" Baxter asked. "Indeed," Yahid said. "That is the power you must learn to wield, to recite the texts of events that once occurred. In doing so, you reread the passage of history to recur, to incite events of the world's mythical history, the living lore, to resurface. And as the words are spoken, and the great eye sees your words spoken into the fabric of the present, it shall overwrite the utterance with imagery of the past, merging the text together, to transcribe the ancient past onto the present. That is the source of my power and the power of the gazers." "He has to be old to do that?" Derek asked. Idle jabbed him in the ribs, and he gasped out a snort, trying to stifle his laughter. "The gazers are watchers of the abyss," Madame Sutwood said in a serious tone. "We are keepers of the hidden truth, of the knowledge of the ocean of death beneath the surface of our world. And those who are born without light and life yet act as if they live regardless on the border of both worlds. Those are the shades, though you may know far more by what is contained within the book." "You haven't read it?" Baxter asked. "I haven't the time," she said quite casually. "Our purpose is to guide society away from studies outside their own nature, and more importantly, to manage the revision of the living lore. The lands of Vincia are unique to history. They are the first of their kind in all writings. To properly uphold them, certain members of the private parties must delegate the passing of powers to the ruling classes, to prevent another age of conquest from repeating." "There is a great deal to learn," Yahid said, "about the revisions of history, the cycles of repeating text, the nature of the living lore. Though we have spent much of our lives learning and understanding these things and making great use of them for the benefit of others, it falls on you now to seal the abyss away once again. You must become the lore master, find the path walked once before, and act upon it for the benefit once gained and recorded in the living history of the world." "And you too," Yahid continued, looking at Derek and Idel, "have gone through a great deal of strife to assist the apprentice until he could reach us in this sanctuary. His journey will be difficult alone, but together, as three, you can protect—" "You're not getting rid of me," Derek said, interrupting the discussion as he assumed it led to his dismissal. He stepped up next to Baxter and held him in place with his stiff hand pressed against the boy's back. The pat he gave was so forceful it flipped Baxter's hood up. "At least not until you can carry that book on your own." Baxter undid his hood and looked up with a smile. "That sounds fair. The day I can carry it in my arms without stopping or letting go from dawn to dusk, you'll be exonerated from my service." "Okay, well," Derek said, "let's have it to a great exoneration together." Baxter grinned at his friend's enthusiasm and let his misuse of language slide right off his shoulders. "And you?" Madame Sutwood asked Idel. "You've ported them expertly across the wilderness. With this journey now done, and a new one beginning, is there some other place you'd rather be?" Idel looked at Baxter and then the book. He caught her gaze and they exchanged a serious expression. As presumptuous as he was, in her opinion, he was also smart. He knew what she wanted and showed her the resolve needed to accomplish her own mission. "My father," she answered, "is cursed like those in the cavern of the city. I agreed to accompany them in exchange that he finds a cure for that curse and a way to remove it. My job is not over until that payment has been rendered, and I, as a porter, take pride in what I am. Though my house is small, I will see that task through." Madame Sutwood smiled and gave Idel a gentle pat on the head, which the girl privately savored with a thin-lipped grin. "The road ahead 6 days from now," she told them, "will be a dangerous one. Even just beginning to read through the Walker's book, you should know that there are dangers beyond what beasts and myths you already know. Yes, Baxter agreed. But how many remain? Has time not taken its toll on that land and its vast nothingness to deplete it of these monstrosities? Like all things in history, Yahid said, its problems also recur. Monsters do not die. Though their forms may change, obstacles will remain the same across this path. You must learn it, memorize it, and when the time arrives, you shall recite from it what must occur to overcome the hurdles history places in your way. You do not walk the path of your own story. Regardless, it is a path that will save the world from a dark incursion. Okay, Baxter said. He took a deep breath in and rubbed his eyes. That's pressure. Come on, man, Derek said. He pulled out the chair and pushed Baxter down onto it. Saving the world, mate? And all you have to do is read. That's not exactly, Yahid started, but was interrupted when Baxter clapped his hands together and sat up straight. He looked around for a lantern or candle and found a shutter instead. When he opened it, the bright light from high above was filtered in through a network of mirrors, crystals, and reflective tubes over the swath of his desk. The demonium and the archaic depiction of its author stared back up at him from the light, still darkened by its very weight, like a shadow sticking out from the bright ground below. I suppose I should start, then, Baxter said. In those few words, many things began. He spoke with the same density as the text before him, layered with many meanings and secrets yet to be found. Thus the cycle of lore began anew, and a new master began his work of reading. Chapter 20. Morning came to Galilee. The brigands assembled through the caves and back into the subterranean cavern with their heads low. Some did not make it back as the morning sun dissolved them, leaving only their confused horses to wander with a heap of empty, armored clothing dangling off their saddles. Those who returned were greeted to nothing but shadows ahead. Even as the torches in their hands burned away, they saw nothing beyond their own bodies. It was not the shadows of the underground, where the sun couldn't reach, that blinded them, but something more physically present. A thick and permeable darkness, like a cloud of ink, surrounded them, then all at once grappled them with appendages like many hands running over their bodies. After a blind, deafened journey through the dark, the marked thieves were deposited into the carriage dock and bathed in sinister blue lights. Those who rejected their position out of fear and confusion, or showed regret, or tried to turn away from their duties, were turned back by the light in their eyes. Their bodies quit on them, and they shambled with limp arms and craned necks. Those more willing and more reverent than fearful took to their knees and held their hands in position, in the shape of a mountain with peaks of fingertips tilted upside down. Goffey was at the lead of that group, those who retained their minds under the duress of the vast powers before them. The shades in the cavern were not common ones lent to their cause or tracking the bookkeepers. The first to appear was wrapped in fine cloths and silks, imitating the dressings of the old-world cultures from head to foot. It spoke in a whisper, as though it drew in breath to form its words. Lord Victus approaches, the herald spoke. He who has bound many has come to speak to his first adherent of the high world lands. Goffey tilted his head up. From the rear of the cave, the shadows flooded in like a surge of river waters were filling the passages of the long-dammed cave. When the tide of shadows receded, a shimmer of metallic armor penetrated the dark, and the vision of Victus stood before Goffey with a heavy metal instrument in his hand, a solid rod with no edge or piercing point, tipped down to the floor. He rested his armored palm upon it like a scepter and waved his free hand for his thief to rise. "They escaped!" Victus hissed. Goffey stood and avoided the eyes of his apparent lord. "That they did," he said. But we know where they are. A place your kind can't go, yes. But that is not to say it is a place impenetrable. We are thieves. We are experts of stealth and sneaking. Give us a few days, or perhaps a week at the most, and I promise you we can infiltrate their walls against their light and retrieve the book. Just one chance against the luck of the world. This time there won't be interruption. This time... Victus grabbed Goffy's face and growled. Goffy struggled briefly before his body was emaciated. The heft of his figure shriveled inward, and his face went shallow. His life drained away, and he was left half-living, eyes glowing blue, voice lost to a hollow, whispering groan as he shuffled his way to the side where the other mindless revelers went. Victus looked in his hand where the steam-like wisp of life sucked into his palm. He hissed as it entered him and stoked the fire in his eyes brighter. "It has been written," Victus said. All lifted their hands to his words. Their fingers pointed up, a mountain rising from the dark. "It shall be done." The cavern filled with darkness again, and the man from the abyss laid in wait once more. To try again for his chance to change the history before him and darken the pages of the living lore.
If you're enjoying our audio content, please like and subscribe. It's the best way to help out the channel.